Our speaker is Adam Bode from School of Archaeology and Anthropology at the Australian National University, Canberra, Australia. Today, he presents his talk on the topic Phenotypes of Romantic Love. Adam is currently enrolled in a PhD program in biological anthropology at the Australian National University, Canberra, Australia. He also holds a position as a sessional academic at Federation University, Australia, in the Institute of Health and Well-Being. His interdisciplinary research investigates romantic love and human mating using methods and approaches from biological anthropology, human ethology, and psychology. He employs an ethological framework in his theory and analysis. Today, he will give a talk on the topic, Phenotypes of Romantic Love.
G'day everyone, my name's Adam Bode and I'm a PhD student in biological anthropology at the Australian National University. I'm going to talk to you today about a paper I've written with my supervisor Phil Kavanagh from the University of Canberra about phenotypes of romantic love. I'm going to start by introducing a few concepts. The first is variation. Variation is the basis for individual differences and it's one of the requirements for evolution to occur. We know that variation exists in the expression of romantic love, including in its intensity, duration, the presence or intensity of obsessive thinking, and in its components, passion, intimacy, and commitment, but no one has directly investigated this. A phenotype is a manifest property of an organism, including its behaviors, including its cognitions, including its emotions. It's basically the expression of the interaction between genes and the environment, and phenotypes indicate variation. Variation and phenotypes have implications for human biology. I'm an interdisciplinary romantic love researcher and I use methods from human ethology to study romantic love. And we know there's 4 branches of human ethology, including the mechanisms, development, functions, and evolutionary history. And all of these branches are going to look at a concept like romantic love differently depending on the phenotype that is expressed. Essentially, we need to understand the nuance of the behavior or trait we are investigating. In my circumstance, we need to understand the nuance of the expression of romantic love. So we're at a love conference, but everybody's got a slightly different understanding of what romantic love is. I'm going to use an ethologically informed definition of romantic love, which is essentially a motivational state, typically associated with a desire for long-term mating with a particular individual. It occurs across the lifespan and is associated with distinctive cognitive, emotional, behavioral, social, genetic, neural, and endocrine activity in both sexes. Throughout much of the life course, it serves mate choice, courtship, sex, and pair bonding functions. It can best be described as a suite of adaptations and byproducts that arose sometime during the recent evolutionary history of humans. It's sometimes referred to passionate love and is associated with the early stages of a romantic relationship, but can exist in the absence of a romantic relationship or after many years or decades. So our research question was, are there different phenotypes of romantic love? And to do this, we employed a cluster analysis. Cluster analysis is a group of methods that analyze associations between respondents. Respondents are assigned to a class based on a number of fixed variables. If you're familiar with factor analysis or principal component analysis, it does something very similar, but instead of grouping variables, it groups cases. We in particular use a 2-step cluster analysis, which is good for large data sets and accommodates categorical and continuous variables, and has been used once before in love research. We selected a solution based on the commonly used statistical criterion of Schwarz's BIC, as well as the substantive criteria of meaningfulness, scientific usefulness, and parsimony. The methods were drawn from the Romantic Love Survey 2022, which is the world's largest data set of people experiencing romantic love. We ended up using 809 of them who came from 33 different countries. They'd all been in love for less than 24 months because we wanted to make sure we were assessing early stage romantic love rather than long-term romantic love. And only participants with scores above 130 on the passionate love scale we used because we wanted to make sure these people were actually experiencing romantic love. The sample was pretty weird, a lot of Western countries, and they were generally well-educated or current students. All of them were from OECD countries plus South Africa. All of them were democracies, and all of the participants spoke English. As you can see on the right, we did have some traditionally non-Western countries involved, so quite a number of people from South Africa, Poland, Mexico, Hungary, Chile, that sort of thing. We included in the cluster analysis 4 primary variables. The first was the intensity of romantic love, measured by the passionate love scale. The second was obsessive thinking, which was measured by the percentage of time participants thought about a loved one during the day. Commitment, which was measured by using the commitment subscale of the triangular love scale 15, although we used a 9-point response format instead of the recommended 5. And the frequency of sex per week, which was basically the number of times people have sex per week. These were opportunistically selected. They were not theoretically selected, and that is a limitation of the study, but it's nonetheless informative. So we put the variables in, and out came a 4-cluster solution. We did try a number of different clusters with different variables, but this is the one we settled on. And we basically came up with 4 distinct clusters, which we've titled mild romantic lovers, which constitute 20% of the sample, moderate romantic lovers, which constituted 40% of the sample, libidinous romantic lovers, which constituted about 10% of the sample, and intense romantic lovers, which constituted about 30% of the sample. And this is what the clusters look like. So what we have here are each of the graphs represent each of the 4 primary variables, and the bars, starting from left to right, represent mild, common, libidinous, and intense romantic lovers. So as you can see on the left with the blue, the mild romantic lovers had the lowest intensity, the lowest obsessive thinking, the lowest commitment, and the lowest frequency of sex per week. Moderate romantic lovers had moderate intensity of romantic love, pretty low obsessive thinking, moderate to high commitment, and relatively moderate frequency of sex per week. Libidinous romantic lovers in the orange had moderate to high intensity, moderate obsessive thinking, moderate to high commitment, and extremely high sex per week. So as you can see, the other 3 groups had a frequency of sex per week ranging from a little over 2 to about 3.5, but the libidinous romantic lovers had an average of about 10. The range for libidinous romantic lovers was 5 to 20 times per week. So they were definitely characterized most by the frequency of sex per week. And on the right in the purple, you have intense romantic lovers that scored the highest on intensity, the highest on obsessive thinking, the highest on commitment, and relatively high on frequency of sex per week. So once we had created our clusters with the primary variables, what we did was get a whole heap of secondary variables and compared the clusters using ANOVAs and chi-square tests. And so I'm p-hacking a bit here. I'm just going to report where we found some differences, but in the paper we are much more robust and present non-significant findings as well. But as you can see, the clusters differed in months in love. And I'll just point out what I've done here is put in red particularly high scores on a variable and in green particularly low scores on the variables. So as you can see, the libidinous romantic lovers had been in love for the longest period of time, and the mild romantic lovers had been in love for the shortest period of time. This may indicate that what we're assessing are not just phenotypes, but some aspect of trajectory of romantic love may be involved. The clusters also differed in terms of reciprocated love, with the intense romantic lovers being the most likely to know that their partner definitely loved them, and the mild romantic lovers being the least likely to know that their partner definitely loved them in return. They also differed on demographics. The mild romantic lovers had the highest proportion who were male, and the intense romantic lovers had the highest proportion who were female. And there were some differences in sexual orientation, with the moderate romantic lovers having the highest proportion of homosexuals. This is also differed on relationship characteristics. In particular, mild romantic lovers were the most likely to be dating and not cohabiting, and intense romantic lovers were the most likely to be committed and cohabiting. Relationship satisfaction also differed, with intense romantic lovers being the most satisfied and mild romantic lovers being the least satisfied. We also asked participants to rate their own and their partner's mate value. We said, objectively taking everything into consideration, how attractive are you as a mate, or is your partner as a mate? And as you can see, the intense romantic lovers rated both themselves and their partner the highest, and the mild romantic lovers rated themselves and their partner the lowest. The relative mate value is the self-mate value minus the partner mate value, and as you can see, the biggest discrepancy is for the intense romantic lovers. The clusters also differed on personality, particularly on agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. And we also asked participants to complete the hypermanic checklist 32, which is a measure of elevated mood. And as you can see, the total score libidinous romantic lovers scored the highest and mild romantic lovers scored the lowest. But there are also a number of differences with specific variables within that checklist. And as you can see, the libidinous and intense romantic lovers tended to be the most likely to endorse a number of elevated mood characteristics, and the mild romantic lovers reported were the least likely to endorse specific variables. So what are the implications of the study? It seems like distinct phenotypes of romantic love may exist, and cluster analysis is a useful method for identifying potential phenotypes. And the findings identify areas for future research, including in specific areas of psychology, but also for the mechanisms, development, functions, and evolutionary history of romantic love. There are a number of limitations. First and foremost is that the primary variables were not theoretically sound. So while these may represent phenotypes, and it is scientifically useful to have done this, they're not phenotypes that are the most scientifically useful for future research. And in 2026, we plan on collecting more data with a broader range of variables, and we'll be able to then take a theoretically informed cluster analysis or latent class analysis to do something similar. It is a weird sample, and it's a relatively small sample, so there are a number of limitations, but nonetheless I think it's an interesting and informative study. Thank you.